If you recall, yesterday we were discussing JavaScript functions versus C functions, and we showed there's a lot of similarities between the two, but there's also a lot of differences, most of them stemming from JavaScript being weakly typed and C# being strongly typed. And we showed how to declare a function and call a function, and we also discussed return values. And in both the case of JavaScript and C#, return values are returned with the return statement. So here's an example of a JavaScript program with a return that returns the local value of num that's set to 3, the local variable var num. And this is called by outside the function by saying the name of the function and setting it equal to a global variable outside num, and then printing it out with the message box via the alert statement in JavaScript. So if we run this, do a launch in Chrome, see we get the alert box that says the return value is 3. Moving on to what we want to discuss today, we want to discuss passing arguments to a function. And you pass arguments to a function via the two parens that are after the name of the function. And there's two varieties of this. You can pass a single argument, or you can pass multiple arguments. There's actually a lot of varieties, but that's all we're discussing today. So here we have a JavaScript function called passReturnNumber, and between the parents we have what's called a parameter, and I'm using an underscore as a convention to say anything with an underscore is a parameter, but you don't necessarily have to use this convention. You can use pretty much any name between these parentheses. And what we do is once again have a local variable called num, and we set that equal to the parameter, which is the value that is passed into the function. And then we use the return statement to return this local variable. And in order to call this function, we give the name of the function, passReturnNumber, but this time we actually also pass what's called an argument, which in this case is the literal 15, but it could also be a variable name or an expression or something along those lines. And then in order to get the returned value from this function, we have the equal sign, and we set it equal to an external variable called outside num. And then we use the alert JavaScript statement to pop up a message box that says what value got first passed to this function and then returned from this function. So if we launch this in Chrome, we do indeed get a message box that shows we successfully passed the value in and then returned the value back from the function. If we look at the equivalent function in C#, basically we have a function of the name passReturnNumber, but this time we have to specify a return value of int because it's strongly typed and it needs to know what type of value you're returning, and the type of value you're returning also has to match this type or you're going to get an error. And then in the parameters we also have to specify an int as being the parameter passed in. So that's once again the difference between the weakly typed JavaScript and the strongly typed C#. And then we have a local variable defined as int and set to the parameter value, and a return statement that returns this value. And in order to call this, we specify the name of the function or method, and then we specify a literal parameter of 15, which once again could be a variable name or expression or a number of other ways of passing a value. And then in order to get the value actually returned by this function, we have the equal sign and an external or a globally defined variable of outside num. And in order to display this at form load time, we do a message box.show, and we have to do a toString method on the outside num variable because it's an integer and we can only display strings with message box. We use the concatenation operator, which is was plus in both JavaScript and C#, and concatenate that together and then display it in a message box. So if we save this program and then compile and run it, we do indeed get a message box that pops up that says passed and returned number is 15. And when we close this message box, the form finished loading because we're trapping the form load event in order to display that. You don't have to limit yourself to one parameter or argument with functions in either JavaScript or C#. You can have basically as many as you want as long as they're separated by commas. So in the case of this function, sum of numbers, we have two parameters, underscore num1 and underscore num2, and these are separated in a list with a comma, and you can have as many more as you want. Just keep putting commas and new parameter names. And within the body of the function, we have local variable equals num1 plus num2, and in this case the plus operator is a regular sum operator and arithmetic because we have both integers on either side of it. And then we have the return statement that returns the num, and in order to invoke this we say the name of the function, but this time we pass two arguments, 3 which goes into num1 and 95 which goes into num2. They correspond directly. The first one goes into the first one, the second one goes into the second one, and so on. And after the sum's been done by the function, we get the returned value with an equal sign, and they set that equal to a global variable of outside num, and display it on the screen with the JavaScript alert, which pops up a message box, and we have the message concatenated with the plus operator with the external variable. So if we launch this in Chrome, we get the message the sum of numbers 3 and 95 is 98, where the 98 is the returned value. Now if we go to the C# code, I'll comment out the first function call with Control E C, and then I'll uncomment a call to the second function call sum of numbers with Control E U for uncomment out. And the equivalent function sum of numbers is once again only different by the fact that C# is typed. So we have an int return type, an int for the first parameter, an int for the second parameter, and then an int for the local variable. And the local variable is set to num1 plus num2, and then we return the local variable with a return statement, pretty much identical to JavaScript. And in order to invoke this function or method, they're more often called methods in C#. We have the name of the function, sum of numbers, the first argument, which corresponds to the first parameter, num1, the second argument, which corresponds to the second number, num2, and once these are summed, we get the return value with an equal sign and the global variable outside num. And we once again show what we got back with the message box.show that has the initial literal string message concatenated with the return value, which is set to string because we can only display strings in a message box show. So we need the toString method to convert the integer to a string. And if we save this code and then compile and run it, we do indeed get the message box that says the sum of numbers 3 and 95 is 98, the same as JavaScript. I click OK and the form loads. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and don't forget to subscribe.